Good evening, everyone. I am Councillor Laura Binks, Mayor of Strathbogie Shire Council. I would like to welcome you all to this ordinary council meeting of 19th of April 2022. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the places we live, work and play. We recognise and respect the enduring relationship they have with their lands and waters, and we pay respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Today we are meeting on the lands of the Taungurung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation, whose sovereignty here has never been ceded. It is with pleasure that we again welcome community members into the gallery following the lifting of some COVID-19 pandemic restrictions. We are still socially distanced and following good hygiene practices as required by current COVID regulations. I also wish to welcome those watching the live streamed meeting via our website. I want to take the opportunity to outline that voting at today's meeting will be held by a show of hands. If a councillor has a conflict of interest in a matter, they will be asked to leave the meeting and no discussion on the matter will commence until we are sure that they have done so. Councillors will be contacted to rejoin the meeting after the matter has been considered and the vote concluded. CEO Solomon, are there any apologies for tonight's meeting?
Thank you, Mayor. We have received 3 apologies for tonight's meeting from Councillor Chris Rayburn, from Councillor Paul Murray and from Kristen Favaloro, Executive Manager, Communications and Engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Solomon. Councillors, are there any disclosures of conflicts of interest to be made under Rule 94 of our Governance Rules and Division 2 of the Local Government Act 2020? Yes, Councillor Horrigan.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I declare a conflict of interest for agenda number 9.4.2. This is a material conflict of interest, and I will need to leave the room due to being the director of a company that has a leasehold with the Royal Caravan Park.
Thank you, Councillor Horrigan. I'd just like to note that I have an interest but not a conflict in item 9.1.2, planning applications received and determined, as I am a board member of the Violet Town Bush Nursing Centre, who is an applicant for a planning permit listed in this item for noting. Okay, councillors, the minutes of the ordinary council... Yes, Councillor, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
That's okay. Through you, Mayor. I have a material conflict of interest in item 9.3.2 for tender of contract number CN 21-22-27, as my direct family members are company directors of this one of the businesses that is proposed on the panel.
Thank you, Director Tingay. That has been noted. And apologies, I missed your hand go up there. So, councillors, the minutes of the ordinary council meeting 15th March 2022 require confirmation. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Andrews?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the recommendation to accept the minutes be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Horrigan, thank you. I will put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, CEO Solomon, do we have any petitions to be tabled this evening?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. No, there are no petitions this evening.
Thank you, CEO Solomon. Councillors, would any of you like to make any reports to our meeting tonight? No? Okay, I will make a report. So This past month, we have launched our 2022 Strathbogie Shire Council Advocacy Ask, this document here, which is just a draft print in-house at the moment, but it is getting printed at the printers. And our ask is to seek support from politicians in the lead up to the federal and state elections. Over the past year, Council's advocacy program has stepped up in response to what you told us via the 2020 and 2021 Community Customer Satisfaction Survey, and has been bold and achieved results. Our 2022 advocacy priority document identifies Council's priorities where our Shire ambition needs to be matched by other levels of government. Building on our success in 2021, we are resolved to keeping our community advocacy front and centre as we enter a generationally important election year. Our top 5 priorities include securing funding for equitable digital and telecommunications infrastructure, reliable power supply infrastructure, 2026 Commonwealth Games bid for rowing, Greening Euroa pilot project, and nature-based play space Euroa. As we emerge from the pandemic to face the challenges of economic recovery and population growth, our region is fast becoming a destination for people to invest, live, visit, and play in. We are confident that an advocacy-led approach will see us well placed to achieve our strategic goals in the coming years. You will be able to view our Advocacy Ask document on our website from tomorrow. From Monday the 28th of March through to Sunday the 3rd of April, Strathbogie was proud to host the Rowing Australia National Rowing Championships, relocated from Penrith in Sydney due to water contamination. With only 8 days to bump in this national event, we welcomed close to 2,000 athletes, plus their coaches and support crews, and, of course, the spectators. The economic uplift from this visitation to our Shire spanned our entire Shire as well as neighbouring councils. Sunday the 3rd of April saw the culmination of a fantastic week of rowing at Nagambie with the Kings and Queens Cup reception, where I had the pleasure of welcoming from Canberra His Excellency the Honourable David Hurley and ACDSC Governor-General of Australia, and from Switzerland, Vincent Galliard, the FISA Executive Director of World Rowing, to our Shire. The Australian National Rowing Regatta was a huge success. Rowing Australia were thrilled with the venue and the efforts of the Strathbogie Shire Council officers. Thank you all in our community who responded to the call for assistance and volunteered their time to make this event a huge success at short notice. Together, we achieved great outcomes for our community. Last week, I was privileged to preside over the citizenship ceremony, naturalising and warmly welcoming 5 new Australian citizens who call Strathbogie Shire Australia home. It was a moving ceremony, the first in-person event for some time due to the pandemic. I would also like to acknowledge that next Monday, councillors will be attending Anzac Day ceremonies across the Shire to recognise the sacrifice and bravery of our service women and men, past and present, and all those who supported them back home during many campaigns and peacekeeping operations across the globe. I encourage each of you here, online and viewing this recording, to visit the Strathbogie Shire Engagement Hub, www.sharestrathbogie.vic.gov.au. We are constantly updating this webpage with project information, surveys and community engagement. Finally, I hope that everyone has enjoyed the Easter break, and for those that are still on holidays, please take care on the roads, take your time and drive carefully during this busy time of year. And CEO Solomon, are there any questions from the public this evening?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Yes, we have received one question for this evening from Andrew Townsend of Strathbogie, who asks 2 questions. The first question is, will Council advise the process for the formation of the working group in relation to the streetscape design for Strathbogie, whilst ensuring the process will be democratic and transparent? And the second question, could Council please advise whether road and pedestrian access improvement works in Strathbogie Township have been logged and when dates for this work will be advised? Andrew, thank you for your questions. In response to your first question, the creation of the streetscape working groups will be undertaken through an expression of interest process. The expression of interest will ask a range of questions that relate to the terms of reference membership criteria. Expressions of interest will open in the coming weeks, and following the closing date, applications will be assessed by an internal council officer review panel. In response to your second question, I have asked officers to contact you to clarify the nature of the works in question, to better understand the issues relating to this matter, and also to arrange an on-site inspection. It may also be appropriate that these upgrades form part of the streetscape works to be undertaken over the next number of years. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, CEO Sullivan. Okay, we'll now move on to page 1 of the agenda, item 9.1.1, planning permit application number P2021-108- use and development of land for a dwelling and the removal of native vegetation, lot 1 on title plan 393753 Reedy Lake Road, Bellaston. Director Tingay, may we have a summary of the report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. As you've just alluded to, this proposal is to use and develop the land for a dwelling with associated outbuilding along with vegetation removal. The subject site is located in Bellaston and is in a farming zone. It's situated on a lot just over 4,000 square metres. Within the farming zone and in this particular area, the minimum size for a dwelling is a minimum lot of 40 hectares. This particular lot is not identified within the rural residential strategy. The application was advertised with no objections being received. The site is surrounded by larger farming lots. Following the assessment of the proposal against the planning scheme, the proposal does not meet the purpose and also the decision guidelines for the farming zone. There is a recommendation commencing on page 1 of the agenda for Council's consideration this evening, and that recommendation is that Council resolve to issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit, and the recommendation is there for discussion. Thank you, Mayor Binks.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Councillors, does anyone have a question of Director Tingay on this item? No, we do not have any submitters wishing to speak. So, councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the recommendation on page 1 of the agenda be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hourigan, thank you. Is there any opposition? Councillor Andrews, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a great deal of empathy for the applicant in this particular application. They're putting a lot of work and gone about it in what appears to be a diligent way. I also see that our planners have put a lot of time and effort into the application as well, and have followed our planning scheme and policy. And my analogy is, why have a speed limit if you're not going to either enforce it or adopt it? And I see a similar situation here. So at this stage, as our planning scheme and policies don't support this application, I would go forward with the recommendation and deny or refuse the application.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Hourigan, did you wish to speak to the motion?
I do. Thank you, through you, Mayor. I too am. I definitely am sympathetic to the refusal and what this has done, obviously for the applicant or how they're feeling at the moment. But I too agree with the refusal and all of the surrounding, there are 3 large farms that are surrounding this particular dwelling. And whilst I know that, you can introduce things like a 173 agreement and other various issues, it still doesn't stop complaints about farming activities, which then obviously, comes to councils and local laws officers have to investigate and all of that. And there's a reason why the planning scheme says what it says, and it's to protect not just the farmers surrounding them, but also the homeowner of this particular land. And so I wanted to make sure that they understood the explanation on why I've chose to go this way.
Thank you, Councillor Hourigan. Would any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Yes, Councillor Dickinson.
Yeah, I think this was a very difficult decision to come to, and I think that in some respects almost an agonising decision, realising what's at stake. And so I want to assure the applicant that it has been given every consideration, but in the end we must abide, not must, but we should be guided by what the planners have put forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Did you want to? No. Okay. Did you wish to respond, Councillor Andrews?
No, thank you, Mayor.
No. Okay. Councillors, I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour, can I see show hands? And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Page 32, item 9.1.2, planning applications received and planning applications determined the 1st to the 31st of March 2022. Director Tingay, may we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. There were 17 new planning applications received and also 15 planning applications determined upon during the period of the 1st to the 31st of March 2022. There is a recommendation on page 32 for Council's consideration. Thank you, Mayor Binks.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Did anyone have any questions to Director Tingay regarding this item? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please? And can you state what your motion is? Councillor Hourigan.
Thank you. I would like to move a motion that we support the recommendation on page 32 of the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Hourigan. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Hayes-Burke. Thank you. Is there any opposition? Do you wish to speak to the motion? No. No. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? No. Councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour and against, and I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Page 41 of the agenda. Item 9.2.1, application for sponsorship, Euroa Town Criterium event. Director Tingay, may we have a summary, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. Councillors received an application for sponsorship towards the Euroa Town Criterium event. This event is planned to be held on the 23rd of April, with the funds that are requested for sponsorship to be helped to cover the costs of traffic management and also official timing for the event. The event will be held on the day prior to the Ride the Ranges Euroa event, which is very much encouraging cycling enthusiasts, crews, friends and families to stay in our Shire for not just a day trip but for the weekend. The application has been assessed against the guidelines and there is a recommendation on page 41 for Council's consideration to support this sponsorship application. Thank you, Mayor Binks.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please? And can you state what your motion is? Yes, Councillor Dickinson.
I'd like to move the recommendation on page 41 of the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Andrews. Thank you. Is there any opposition? No. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Dickinson?
Thank you, Mayor. look, it's great for tourism, it's great for Euroa, it's great for our region, and we should continue to support events such as this.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Councillor Andrews, would you like to speak? No. Would any other councillor like to speak to the... yes, Councillor Hesberg.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thanks, Matt. I think it's an honour to be able to support events like this. I think it's a fabulous and unique event for Euroa, and I think it also highlights the need for a cycling strategy, which we do have in our council plan, but that will be yet to come. But it just shows how well known we are for cycling in the region, so it sort of highlights that.
Thank you, Councillor Hesberg. Councillors, I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour and against, and I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to page 49, item 9.2.2, terms of reference, streetscape plan, working groups in Strathbogie and Violet Town. Director Tingay, can we have a summary, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. At last month's council meeting, council resolved to endorse the formation of working groups to develop further draft designs for Strathbogie and Violet Town, with the terms of reference for these groups to be developed to help support the continuation of the streetscape plan project. This report details those terms of reference to support the streetscape working groups. It is proposed that the working group in each town will consist of a maximum of 12 people who represent a range of community perspectives from different sectors or interest groups within the individual townships. It is proposed that an expression of interest process be undertaken to seek the membership of the actual groups. There is a recommendation on page 49 for council's consideration. Thank you, Mayor Binks.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, and can you state your motion, please? Councillor Hesberg.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that council adopt the terms of reference for the streetscape working groups. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hesberg. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Dickinson. Thank you. Is there any opposition? No. Councillor Hesberg, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks. Thanks for putting together the terms of reference. I thought that was a good read. I also just really encourage community members to express their interest in being a part of this working group. I hope it's really embraced by the communities, because I think it's a great way going forward to get the best outcome.
Thanks, Councillor Hesberg. Councillor Dickinson, did you wish to speak? No. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. Okay, councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour and against, and I declare that carried. Thank you. Page 57, item 9.2.3, feasibility study, Strathbogie Shire Council Resource Recovery Centre resale shop. Director Roth, may we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. So with a $10,000 grant from state government, we conducted a feasibility study into a resale shop at either of our transfer stations. There's a detailed report attached in the agenda. The finding was that the conditions were favourable for one shop, and the recommendation based on feedback, access, site infrastructure, material throughput and operational costs was at Ngambie. And that's the recommendation. It would be managed and staffed by council employees Monday to Thursday and Friday, as is now, but with additional hiring on Saturday and Sunday. And were council to adopt this, we would proceed to the second stage, which would be to apply for funding for the construction of a shed, which is estimated $105,000, of which we would seek 2/3 from government.
Thank you, Director Roth. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Dickinson.
Yeah, I move that the recommendation on page 57 of the agenda be accepted.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Is there a seconder? Councillor Andrews. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Is there any opposition to the motion? No. Councillor Dickinson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. This is really good. It's a great initiative from our officers making this recommendation. A resale shop at the Nagambie Resource Recovery Centre. It can only be good for the community, and I would encourage people in Nagambie get behind it, and instead of throwing out so much of your reusable rubbish, you can now look forward to having a shop where it can be perhaps reused or resold.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Councillor Andrews, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I just think it's admirable that items can be repurposed and reused by the people rather than go to landfill, and can reduce our waste output. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Would anyone other councillor like to speak to the motion? Yes, Councillor Hayes-Burke.
I'm for this motion as well. I'm really excited by the prospect of having a resale shop at the tip. I should say Resource Recovery Centre. It's with the increasing trend of stuff going to landfill, I think we desperately need to look for repurposing items, and I hope it can be rolled out at the start in Nagambie and hopefully in the future in other spots across the Shire.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Councillors, I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Up to page 120 of the agenda, item 9.2.4, Revised Community Grants Program Guidelines 2022. Director Tingay, can we have a summary, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. Our council offers a community grants program that encourages applications from organisations and community groups to apply for support for projects that improve the livability of residents within our community. Following the 2021 program, a review of the grant guidelines has been undertaken. A number of amendments have been made to the guidelines that include the revised dates for the 2022 program and also the inclusion of a round 2 for the program should the initial round 1 be undersubscribed. There is a recommendation on page 120 for council's consideration. Thank you, Mayor Binks.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Councillors, are there any questions of the Director? No. Okay, councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Horrigan.
Thank you. I would like to move a motion that we support the recommendation on page 120 of the agenda, please.
Thank you, Councillor Horrigan. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hayes-Burke. Thank you. Is there any opposition to the motion? No. Councillor Horrigan, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. Thank you. I love the community grant, so I think this is a really great initiative by council to get the community involved and to support different projects that they have in their community by putting in an application and trying to get some funding. The community grants program, if you're wanting to read about it, is attached to this agenda. So it starts from page 125 and it does go through the guidelines. And it's also got a really great flowchart on page 129, which does detail when applications are open, when they close, when they'll be assessed, and when the recommendations will come to council. So it's a good time now for anyone that's looking at applying to start thinking of projects, remembering that applications open from June 1st, 2022.
Thank you, Councillor Horrigan. Councillor Hayes-Burke, would you like to speak to the motion? No. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? No. Okay, councillors, I will put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Page 140, item 9.2.5, Climate Change Action Plan, draft for exhibition. Director Roth, may we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. So in April 2021, Council declared a climate emergency, and since then staff have been working with the community to develop an action plan, and that has subsequently been implemented into the Council plan as an action. The plan covers 5 areas: protecting a natural environment, reducing our emissions, our climate resilient community, living sustainably, advocating for change. Contains a series of actions which we believe are achievable, which are all designed to address the issue of climate change. And the recommendation is to release the draft action plan for public comment for a 6-week period, and then to come back with a further report on the results of that.
Thank you, Director Roth. Councillors, are there any questions to Director Roth? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please? And can you state what your motion is? Yes, Councillor Dickinson.
The motion is as stated on page 140. I won't read it out. So yeah, I move that be accepted.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Do I have a seconder to the motion? Councillor Hayes-Burke, thank you. Is there any opposition to the motion? No. Councillor Dickinson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It's been quite a while since this was first introduced. Now it's an opportunity for the public, some of whom were quite outspoken at the time. They are now given the opportunity, a 6-week period, to contribute to the plan, change it if they wish, say whatever they want to say. It's the opportunity of the public now to have a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Councillor Hayes-Burke, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. I guess I can understand why it has taken some time, because this is now part of core business of council. It's in the council plan. Before, when we introduced it, it wasn't in the council plan, and we placed sort of an extra burden, I guess, on officers. But now we're excited to share this with the community. I guess there is already a pretty heavy framework of legislation that requires council to make decisions that take into account climate change. These are the Local Government Act, the Climate Change Act, and the Planning Environment Act. Therefore, and also most importantly, many of the actions that are in this Climate Change Action Plan have already been endorsed by the community through the Community Vision, which was created by the Strathbogie Shire Community Panel. The community in that vision told us that they value what they value, and these included caring for nature, living in a healthy environment, an engaged community, and connected people and places. All of these themes are from the community in vision are encapsulated in this Climate Change Action Plan. Therefore, I'd really like to encourage everyone to read the plan and just check that it hits the mark for you. I think it's a really good step in us becoming a more environmentally friendly Shire. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. Councillors, I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. So item 9.3.1 on page 146, tender for contract number CN 21-22-31, supply of gravel products, panel of suppliers agreement. Director Roth, can we have a summary, please?
Thank you, Mayor. So gravel is obviously critical to our road maintenance effort, both sealed and unsealed roads. So this tender has been for a 3-year period for road base of different classes and sizes, which will be sourced depending on the job that we need to do. We still need to seek quotes from the panel, but this just allows us to do it a bit more simply. 3 of the 4 suppliers are local, but we've left the 4 on the panel just to give us some flexibility in case there might be supply issues at some point. So the recommendation is there for a panel of suppliers.
Thank you, Director Roth. Councillors, are there any questions to the officer? No. In that case, councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Hayes-Burke.
Yes, I'd like to support the recommendation on page 146. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Haysbert. Do I have a seconder to the motion? Councillor Andrews. Thank you. Is there any opposition? No. Councillor Haysbert, would you like to speak to the motion? No. Would you like to speak? No. Would any councillor like to speak to the motion? No. Councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour, please. And against. And to declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 9.3.2 on page 152. Tender for contract, and Director Tingay, for those watching our stream, Director Tingay has left the council chambers due to her conflict of interest. So this is item 9.3.2, tender for contract number CN 21-22-27, provision of weed and pest management service, panel of suppliers, including annual roadside fire risk reduction program, lump sum. Director Roth, can we have a summary of the report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. So we require weed and pest management services for a number of reasons. The fire prevention, spraying of roadsides, drain spraying so that the drains work properly, and also noxious weeds and weeds and pests that we need to treat. The contract also includes the mapping of treated weeds and pests so we can understand where the work's been done, and cutting and posting of stumps. So we've put that together in a tender. It's a 3-year tender similar to the previous one, panel of suppliers, where we'll need to get quotes before we do the work, but the recommendation is there for you.
Thank you, Director Roth. Councillors, are there any questions to the officer on this item? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Andrews.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I move the recommendation on page 152 of the agenda be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Dickinson, thank you. Is there any opposition? No. Would you like to speak to the item? No. Would you like? No. Anyone? No. Okay, councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? And I declare that carried. We will now bring Director Tingay back into the chamber. We're now on page 159 of the agenda, item 9.3.3, contract variation, contract number 20-21-62, Euroa Strathbogie Road and Creek Junction Road intersection realignment. Director Tingay, can we have a summary of the report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. This report is to seek Council's approval for a contract variation. Over 60% of the works have already been undertaken for this contract, which is contract number 20-21-62, Euroa Strathbogie Road and Creek Junction Road intersection realignment. So, as I said, over 60% of the works has already been undertaken, and to complete the project, a variation is required. This variation includes fill material that's required to develop the batters. These batters were omitted from the final design of the project, and there is also other latent ground conditions requiring soft subgrade materials to be used to complete the project. There is a recommendation on page 159 of the agenda for Council's consideration. Thank you, Mayor Binks.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Do councillors have any question of the officers? No. I would just like to clarify with the officer. My understanding is that this is still within what was the budget had allocated to the project. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Thank you, Director Tingay. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Hourigan.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I would like to move a motion that we support the recommendation on page 159 of the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Horrigan. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Andrews, thank you. Is there any opposition to the motion? Do you want to speak to the motion, Councillor Horrigan?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Just quickly, as you pointed out, it was already an allocation in the budget, but I do want to recognise that I can see it's quite a substantial increase in this particular instance, but that is what we're all going through at the moment in regards to inflation, I suppose, and we're seeing it in a lot of different contracts, so not to be alarming that this is probably the new normal, I think, on anything that was quoted back in 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Horrigan. Did you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Andrews?
Thank you, Mayor. Just on top of what Councillor Horrigan said, it's important we get this project finished so we have a safe environment for our people in our Shire.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Did anyone else wish to speak to the motion? No. Councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 9.3.4 on page 164 of the agenda, contract variation, contract number 21-22-17, Roads Rehabilitation Program 2021 to 2022. Director Tingay, can we have a summary of the report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. Contract number 21/22-17 was fully executed on the 7th of March 2022. Works have commenced with approximately over 75% of the project being completed as at the 30th of March 2022. However, due to unforeseen latent conditions at the roadwork locations, and there are 7 locations that are included as part of our rehabilitation program, there has been the requirement for additional works to be undertaken to essentially complete the projects to a higher and more thorough standard. There is a table on page 165 of the agenda that outlines the number of variations that are required to complete the project, including the omission of some works, to which point Golden Valley Water is planning on doing some works as well. There is a recommendation on page 164 of the agenda for Council's consideration tonight, and just to confirm that with this variation, it is still within the original budget allocation for the actual program. Thank you, Mayor Biggs.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Councillors, are there any questions to Director Tingay? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, and can you state what your motion is, please? Councillor Hayes-Burke.
Could I please move the motion on page 164 of the agenda?
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Horrigan, thank you. Did you wish to speak to the motion?
I guess this is not a bad thing because we're still within budget, and I guess I would like to say thanks to officers for also taking the initiative and completing the other required upgrades as part of this rehabilitation program, because in the end it would end up being more costly if we didn't do so.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Did you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Horrigan? Okay. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? No. Councillors, I will put the motion to a vote. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour? And against, and I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Now move on to item 9.3.5, contracts awarded under delegation. Director Tingay, can we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. This is a standard report that we provide to Council in relation to contracts awarded under delegation, whether that be by delegation of the Chief Executive Officer, by a director or a manager. In tonight's report, we are noting for Council's consideration three tenders awarded under delegation, that be for electrical test and tagging, the provision of point of sale systems for the resource recovery centres, and also the Pipe Lake Nagambie project. There is a recommendation for Council's consideration on page 169 of the agenda. Thank you, Mayor Binks.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Councillors, are there any questions to the officer? No. Can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation as put on page 169. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Horrigan, thank you. Is there any opposition to the motion? No. Would you like to speak to the motion? No. Would any councillor like to speak to the motion? No. Okay, councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour, please. And against. And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. On to page 173. Item 9.3.6, Strathbogie Shire Council Asset Plan 2022 to 2032. Director Roth, can we have a summary of the report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. So as the report indicates, the Local Government Act 2020 requires us to prepare an asset plan, which will talk about our approach to managing our assets, which of course we use to deliver services. In the report it references, and the document it references, that our asset base is about $283 million, and that over the next 10 years we expect to spend $83 million renewing and upgrading and $93 million in operating and maintaining our assets, and that 42% of our spend is on asset related matters. So it's quite a significant figure and something where we need to have a plan. The plan talks about creation of assets, monitoring them, maintaining them, operating them, and then eventually rehabilitation, and then eventually in some cases disposing of assets. So there will be further work to be done on asset management plans for specific classes of assets. The document has some general introduction and context that talks about the state of our assets, and there's some interesting graphs in there which show what we call the condition assessment of our roads, bridges, curbs, footpaths and buildings. We have an assessment going on at the moment, so those figures will be updated, but you'll see in there that the condition of assets is generally reasonable. So condition 8, which is where we would normally do work to repair an asset in a significant way, a majority of our assets are below that intervention level, so that's a good start, but there's a bit of work to be done with data and systems and processes, which we're onto. So the recommendation is that we endorse the plan for feedback and that it goes out for public comment. So it's obviously an issue of concern to ratepayers and residents, so we urge them to contribute.
Thank you, Director Roth. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the recommendation on page 173 of the agenda be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Horrigan. Sorry, I was looking the other way. Leaving your hand flew up. Thank you, Councillor Horrigan. Is there any opposition? No. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Andrews? Councillor, would any councillor like to speak to the motion? No. I will. I'd just like to say I concur with the Director's comments. This is a really important document for our Shire, and it's a new requirement under the Local Government Act 2020, and it will help us as a Shire to manage our assets, of which play a huge part in our day-to-day running of the Shire. So it's a really important document for Shire to have created, but also for the community to now have the opportunity to comment on our asset plan. So it will be going up for public exhibition until the 31st of May. Councillors, I will put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? And against, and to declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Page 179 of the agenda. 9.4.1 Strathbogie Shire Council Audit and Risk Committee appointment of Chair. Director off. Can we have a summary of the report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. As the report indicates, previous Chairman Mark Freudenstein has stepped down as Chair of the committee but intends to stay on as a member. And at the meeting on the 25th of March, Paul Ayton, an independent representative, we require the Chair to be an independent rep. Paul was nominated to take the chair, and that requires Council's endorsement.
Thank you, Director Roth. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, and can you state what your motion is, please? Councillor Dickinson, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the motion as set out on page 179 of the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Andrews, thank you. Is there any opposition to the motion? No. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Dickinson? Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Andrews?
Thank you, Mayor. It appears Mr Ayton is well qualified in the business area to take on such a role, and I thank Mark Freudenstein for his efforts and guiding that committee over his time.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. Councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour? And against? And declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Hourigan is leaving our council chambers due to her conflict of interest in this item. So we're now on page 182 of the agenda. Item 9.4.2. And this is the consideration of Nagambie and Euroa Caravan Park line items for the draft 2022 to 2023 budget. Director Roth, can we have a summary of the report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. As the report indicates, there are income and expense line items in the draft budget that relate to caravan parks. And Councillor Hourigan, as a lessee of the caravan park, has an interest. So this item is being considered separately so that she can then participate in the discussion on the budget as a whole.
Thank you, Director of Councillors. Are there any questions to the officer? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the recommendation on page 182 of the agenda be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Do I have a seconder to the motion? Councillor Haysburke. Thank you. Is there any opposition? No. Do you wish to speak to the motion? No. No. Okay. Councillors, I will put the motion to the vote. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour? And against, and I declare that carried. We will now ask Councillor Hourigan to rejoin the meeting. And we're now on to page 186 of the agenda, item 9.4.3, the draft 2022 to 2023 Strathbogie Shire Council budget, preparation of budget, financial plan and fees and charges for exhibition and comment. Director off. Can we have a summary of the report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. So the budget has been prepared as per the requirements of the Local Government Act. It covers a 4-year period, and the recommendation is that it goes out for public comment. Of interest within the budget, the increase in the average rate is 1.75%, which is in line with the rate cap. Now, individual properties will vary from that depending on what's happened with their valuations. The waste charge is recommended to go up 3%. We've had a landfill levy increase from state government of 19%, and there's also been increased fuel costs, which are an input into our waste collection contract. capital works program is 15.05 million, with 9.8 million carried forward from the current year. And we've had a discussion with the audit committee about the projects within that, and I think they're generally comfortable that those projects will be completed. The ratios in terms of liquidity, debt levels are all within normal limits, so we think that's responsible. The audit committee have actually reviewed the document and are satisfied with it. There is also the financial plan, which extends the 4-year budget out for a 10-year period. And in that, we make some assumptions about things like CPI, labour costs and things like that. The audit committee did ask that we include a couple of extra models, if you like, just to test if one increase didn't eventuate and it was different, what would that look like? So we included them in that financial plan at the audit committee's request. And there's also the fees and charges for council services, which are also a document which goes with the budget. So next step is to the council to endorse the budget, and we'll go out for public comment.
Thank you, Director Roth. Officers, are there any questions? Sorry, officers, councillors, are there any questions to the officer? Yes, Councillor Haysbrook.
Director, what was the figure that we were under, sorry, for the financial year for capital works projects that we still had to complete?
We've got 9.8 million on top of 15 in new works.
It seems like a lot, that's all.
Provide that detail to you if you like. It's, yeah, we've been through it, and I think there's action in train for most of that.
That's great. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Haysbrook.
Yes. My motion is I move the recommendation on page 182 of the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, no. 186.
Thank you. Yes, 186. Thank you, Councillor Haysbrook. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Hourigan. Is there any opposition to the motion? No. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Haysbrook?
Firstly, I'd like to thank Director Roth and his team for the enormous amount of work that's gone into preparing these documents. I know there's been hours upon hours and lots of people involved. And I also would like to say that I believe this budget is a result of what we've been hearing from the community. For example, there's been a number of Pitch My Project initiatives that we're delighted to have included in the budget. And basically now we just want to know from the community if we've got it right. So please let us know. I really encourage you to read these documents. I wanted to point out that I'm really excited that there's been money allocated for a playground design and master plan of the Seven Creeks precinct in Euroa. There's money to scope a Shire-wide art trail, and we've also budgeted over $100,000 for climate change initiatives, just to point out a few highlights.
Thank you, Councillor Haysbrook. Councillor Hourigan, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I concur with Sally. Thank you to the team, the council team putting this together, and Director Roth, etc. I love draft budget time, but I do want to remind everyone that it is a draft budget, which means we do want your opinions. So please submit them after having a look. So we've got the written submissions will be closing at 5 p.m. on Monday, the 23rd of May. So we have a fair bit of time for you to have a look at the draft budget and put any things that you'd like in there. I would also like to, I'm very excited in particular also for the scope, the Euroa Play Space and the Seven Creeks Master Plan. We've heard it over and over and over again through the community for the past 2 years. We heard it a lot when we were campaigning, and we know that that's something that we need in Euroa. We're the only town in the whole Shire that has a high school, yet we don't have anything for them to go and enjoy. But equally, I also think it's really exciting that there's also the completion of the Nagambie Foreshore Walk, because that's that's definitely in need. And something that's been sitting on council's books, so I found out, is the rehabilitation of the Violet Town landfill. So that's exciting to actually see a line item in there for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrigan. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No, I would just like to, I'd just like to point out that the Ural Truck Wash has made it in there with some funding allocation in this round, which I think both the Sale Yards Committee and that group will be really excited to see. They've been pushing really hard for some movement on this front to get that facility up and running, and I think it's a really great initiative by council to support that project. So I encourage people to check that item out as well, and of course check out the whole budget and provide your feedback. Councillors, I will put the motion to the vote. Can I get a show of hands for all those in favour, please? And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. And now moving on to page 193 of the agenda, item 9.5.1, reappointment of Municipal Monitor, Director Bray. May we have a summary of the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councillors, in front of you is a report that notes that the Minister for Local Government, Sean Lean, informed Mayor Binks in writing on the 16th of March that our Municipal Monitor, Janet Dorr, has been extended for another 6 months, but at a much reduced work allocation time to up to 2 days per month, and that's down from up to 2 days per week. So the focus of the work is to continue to support the Executive and also the Mayor and councillors on continuing good governance and leadership development, but also on getting the best out of our informal briefing sessions as well, and getting some good governance around how they operate. It's also noted that the Minister informed us that the Municipal Monitor allowance has been increased by 1.5%, and we need to backdate this to the 1st of July 2021. And on page 193 are 3 recommendations in front of you to consider. And one of those is noting that the total cost of the monitor to date is $25,061, and that includes the back pay that is due to the 1st of July. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bray. Councillors, are there any questions to the officer on this item? Yes, Councillor Hayes-Burke.
Thanks, Director Bray. Could you just confirm that that figure is well under what the estimated amount was going to be for the monitor?
So through you, Mayor, when we were first appointed a monitor by the Minister, we were thinking it would be around $30,000. So yes, it has come under that figure.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Councillors, can I have a motion? Oh, sorry, Councillor Horrigan.
Thanks, Director Bray. Just a query, when I can see that this has come to $25,061, I thought when the Minister wrote the document that the Municipal Monitor was supposed to work 2 days a week for a period of 6 months at just over $2,000 a week. Did the Municipal Monitor not see a need to work that amount?
Through you, Mayor, I think the Monitor has worked that amount and probably more, but she has chosen not to claim some of her time and some of her travel and accommodation as well. So I think she has been very economical in what she's been claiming, and that's up to her to decide what she wishes to claim. But I think we certainly have got more value than that out of her appointment.
Yeah, and thank you, Director Bray. Yes, Councillor Horrigan.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. And so in the report, it's saying with a further 6 months to a maximum of 14,000. If my calculations are correct, that brings it to possibly 39,000. Has that then increased the base of 30,000, or are we expecting that she won't be charging that amount?
Through you, Mayor. The 30,000 was based on the initial 6-month appointment, and so we hadn't that hadn't included a further term. However, I can confirm that we don't need any additional budget allocation to meet the costs. And so I think the report is noting that it could be up to 14,000 as a maximum.
Thank you, Director Bray. Thank you, Councillor Horrigan. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the recommendation on page 193 of the agenda be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Dickinson. Thank you. Is there any opposition to the motion? Councillor Andrews, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I personally have found the adoption of the monitor very helpful in developing me as a councillor. It's very important as councillors that we are functional and can work within the guidelines set out in the Local Government Act, which came in right when people were elected. So I think it's been a great service to the Shire, and as Director Bray said, she's been very decent with her expenses and claims. So I think it's been a win all round.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Dickinson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Mayor. Yes. As a new councillor amongst 6 others, we were a group of people who were going to save the world, I think, for quite a while, until we had a few reality checks. And this, to me, goes back to having a proper education before we enter into these situations of being councillors. We were all new, apart from Councillor Rayburn, who had a previous 6 months. Had we got good education prior to seeking election, we may have had a better understanding of what lay ahead of us, and it took a municipal monitor to straighten a few of those things out. I can really only speak for myself here, but I found her to be very helpful to me. I hope and I believe that other councillors found Janet Dorr to also be very helpful. I can't speak for the officers because I haven't heard anything back in that regard, but I would expect that they too used it as a learning situation. And yeah, we're not perfect yet. We've still got a way to go. But by gee, when I look back and see what we were like, and I look at us now, it's a totally different ball game. And we are making good decisions based upon sound judgment and open and honest discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horrigan.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Whilst I agree with the fellow councillors regarding the municipal monitor, I am quite upset that it has cost ratepayers this amount of money, and I do also disagree with the amount that's been set out that the municipal monitor's been paid and etc. And I just can't get my head around how we back pay 1.5% from July, yet we haven't paid her what we were supposed to be paying her anyway. And it sort of, puts me in this. I mean, I know we talk about accommodation, we talk about travel, but it's in writing there how much she's just paid to be here, to be doing it. And so for her to be deducting, I don't even know what the maths is, I can't see it in the report. Makes me uneasy. I mean, is there a time where she can come back later and say, well, I actually did do those hours and more, it's in a council meeting, and so we'd like to claim that money. But I appreciate that she has done that. I just don't understand. I just can't understand why, and I can't help but think that perhaps had we have paid her the amount that we should have, would it even have needed an extension for 6 months? So there is a lot of questions why, but I understand that she was helpful, and I can see that there's other, monitors going to other councils, and perhaps this is something that the government really needs to look at. Why is there so many municipal monitors going out? I think it's definitely a lack of training as a whole, but we've spoken about that through various surveys and recommendations. So, but I do think it's disappointing for our ratepayers because that's a lot of money.
Thank you, Councillor Horrigan. Would any other councillor like to speak? No? Councillors, I will put the motion to the vote. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour, please. And against? No? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 100 on page 197, item 9.5.2, determination of councillor allowances. Director Bray, can we have a summary of the report, please?
Yes, so thank you, Mayor. If you can indulge me, I might do a bit of a long spiel on this because there's a few things that have changed in terms of the new Local Government Act and how councillor allowances are set. The Minister for Local Government requested the Victorian Independent Remuneration Tribunal to review councillor allowances, and this is the first time that that tribunal has been asked to review councillor allowances. Previously it was reviewed by the Minister. So the tribunal undertook some consultation with the local government sector and also with the general public, and I know a few of the ratepayers associations and other peak bodies made some submissions to them. So the tribunal have come back with a series of recommendations and set allowances, and they've made quite a few changes to how those allowances are set. One thing that hasn't changed is that Strathbogie Shire is still in a Category 1 council, which is a small rural council. And but the changes are quite extensive. So instead of having a separate equivalent to superannuation contribution on top of your allowance, the tribunal have recommended that the superannuation or equivalent of superannuation be actually combined with the allowance, so you get one allowance. So that's a significant change to the system that we have currently. In the past, for many years, there's been a range of allowances. So in each of the three categories of local councils, there's been a minimum and a maximum allowance, and councils have set their allowances within those ranges. The tribunal has basically set a single allowance, so there's no range anymore, there's just a set rate. The tribunal also noted that councillors in particularly rural areas weren't claiming a lot of the. You can claim a remote travel allowance of up to $5,500 per annum, and it was noted through the consultation and the surveys that they did through that consultation process that a lot of councillors were not claiming that remote area allowance. And so they're saying that that is certainly an allowance that councillors can use. And there's a lot of guidelines around that. So it's got to be, you've got to travel more than 50 kilometres through the quickest route to a council meeting that's been identified by council through resolution that you needed to attend. So there's quite a lot of criteria around that. And it's $40 or $44 per day up to an annual maximum of $5,500. So another key direction that's come out of the tribunal's determination is that the deputy mayor gets an allowance that's higher than the other councillors. So in the new Local Government Act, the deputy mayor is actually allocated some roles and responsibilities for the first time compared to previous acts or the old 1989 Act. And so the tribunal is trying to reflect that the Office of Deputy Mayor actually has roles and responsibilities that are defined now, and therefore recommending a slightly higher allowance compared to other councillors. The tribunal have also recommended that the mayoral allowance be increased, again to reflect the fact that the new Local Government Act 2020 increases the roles and responsibilities for the mayor. Given the tribunal or no allowance review has been undertaken for about 2 years, the direction from the minister is also to back pay the pay and the allowances to councillors. So, councillors, on page 198, there's a series of recommendations to note the findings of the tribunal and to also set the base allowances as per the tribunal's recommendations, and to back pay councillors to the 18th of December 2021. And there'll be an indexation that's undertaken by the tribunal each year, usually in December. And also noting that the ability to claim the remote area travel allowance, but also in point 6, noting that the Local Government Act has been changed to state that councillors individually can nominate whether or not they receive all of the allowance, a part of the allowance, or none of the allowance. But just in closing, council has to, under the Local Government Act, provide the allowance to councillors, but councillors individually can elect not to be paid those, but we do under law have to pay those allowances. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Bray. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer relating to this item? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the motion or recommendation on page 198 of the agenda be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Horrigan, thank you. Is there any opposition to the motion? No. Councillor Andrews, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate there's many people that don't believe the council should be paid anything, and let alone get a pay rise, and I understand that. We do put a lot of time and effort and thought into what we do. Usually don't do it for the money, and we just want to leave the place a little bit better than we found it, so I would go along with this recommendation and hope they support it.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Horrigan, would you like to speak to the motion? No. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. Okay, councillors, I will put the motion to a vote. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour? And against? And to declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to page 203, item 9.5.3, the 2021 to 2025 council plan update. Director Bray, can we have a summary of the report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. Councillors, this council plan review, although you only adopted it on the 31st, I think it was, or around the 31st of October last year, we're trying to bring it in line with the review and the preparation of the annual budget and also the review of the financial plan, just to make sure that all of our key strategic documents are aligned in terms of when we review them and when they're updated. So because of the election and because of the new Local Government Act, that alignment sort of got out of kilter a little bit last year. So what is in front of you is an updated council plan. We have about 17 or 18 actions in the current year council plan that we have already completed. And so those have been deleted from the draft update. And we've also reworded some of the actions to reflect the work that we've done already on those. And we've also dropped down some of the future work that was identified for the next 4 years down to an action for 2022-23. Just to reflect council priorities through the draft budget. So the proposal, councillors, is to release this for public comment in parallel with the draft budget and the draft financial plan, with submissions closing at 5 p.m. on the 23rd of May, which is exactly the same time as the budget and the financial plan and the fees, and to hear the verbal submissions too on the same date that we consider the budget and financial plan and council fee submissions. So it's just aligning those two processes. But I have to say, I think it's actually pleasing to be able to tick off quite a lot of actions within such a short period of time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Bray. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer? No? Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Haysbert.
Thank you. I would like to move the motion on page 203 of the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Haysbert. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Hourigan. Thank you. Is there any opposition? No. Councillor Haysbert, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would, just because I feel like someone should acknowledge the hard work that's already been done, not to blow our own trumpet, but we are not quite through year one of this council plan yet. We've completed quite a few actions, so I might just run through those. The adoption of the MOU with Taungurung Land and Waters Council, development of the advocacy strategy, which the Mayor raised earlier, development of a brochure identifying community services and referral pathways, the signing of the MOU for further development of the Ngambia Ageing Hub, engagement on the state government's 4-bin system, finalising the design of the Greening Euroa project with in partnership with Goulburn Valley Water, a feasibility study for the reuse shops at the Resource Recovery Centre, business concierge program to support local businesses to respond to the pandemic, funding secured for the provision of generators for relief centres should the power grid fail, Lake Ngambia and Goulburn River Waterway zoning review, the development and approval of the Gender Equity Action Plan, development and approval of our workforce plan, development and adoption of our complaints policy, development and adoption of the CEO employment and recruitment policy, review of the procurement policy, and the realignment of the human and financial resources to implement the council plan through minor restructuring of the organisation by the CEO. And I know there are other actions that are imminent to be completed that we'll soon be able to tick off, and I'm excited to share those with you. So
Thank you, Councillor Haysbert. Councillor Hourigan, would you like to speak to the motion? No. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. I would just like to say I concur with Councillor Haysbert. We've, despite seemingly like we're constantly got things on our to-do list, we actually are managing to achieve quite a lot in our council plan, and it is really encouraging. I participated in the audit and risk meeting a couple of weeks ago, and some of the external members of that Audit and Risk Committee made comment that they would really like to see council's achievements be celebrated more, because they see all the good work that we are achieving, and they would like to see us make note of those achievements more publicly, so that we can, spread the good news of what we are achieving, as well as all the things on the to-do list as well. So, I'd just like to say thanks, and good on us. We're getting there. There's still lots on the list, but we've got to take the wins when we get them. So thank you. Councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. Can I get a show of hands? All those in favour? And against? And declare that carried. Thank you. And now we're on to page 208 of the agenda, item 9.5.4, the monthly performance report. Director Bray, can we have a summary, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I know it probably sounds like I talk about the same things every month, but this month of March, building activity was over $10 million across the Shire, which is quite a significant figure, and I can't recall that figure actually being higher. So, and if you look through pages 209 and 210, a lot of that is basically residential development across the Shire, not just one or two wards. And so it's really just, I suppose, underlining certainly, I suppose, in part, the COVID exodus from Melbourne and the popularity of a shire such as Strathbogie and its proximity to Melbourne in terms of residential development. There is also quite a bit of information in terms of the request throughputs, or the customer requests that we get from people. And again, this is showing continued growth. If you look at the graphs on page 214 under economic growth, you'll see that there were 223 requests around planning So that's often people ring up saying, do I need a planning permit? How do I apply for a planning permit? Questions around permits that are in train. So that again indicates that there's a high level of activity and things that might be coming through the pipeline as well. So I think it's indicating that that growth will be sustained. We also have continuing trends around quite a significant amount of trees and roads, road-related reports. And I think that's, if you look at the weather outside today, it's because we're getting some continued wind and rain events across the Shire, which causes trees to fall down and potholes to form. And so we're doing our best to respond to those quickly. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Bray. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer regarding this report? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Hayesburg?
Yes, I would like to note the report.
Thank you, Councillor Hayesburg. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Dickinson? Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Is there any opposition? No. Councillor Hayesburg, would you like to speak to the report?
Thanks for noting those few items, Director. I was also astounded by those figures with the building and planning. It's always interesting to have this data. I think it's really important, and so thanks for putting it together each month. I also noticed that the curbside diversion rate had actually decreased. So we'd had more landfill over the past 6 months, highlighting the need for the resale shop. So I just wanted to add that in there.
Thank you, Councillor Hayesburg. Councillor Dickinson, would you like to speak to the report?
Nagambie doesn't have an empty shop. Yeah, it's all happening in our Shire. Great work from the officers and staff.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Would any other councillor like to speak to the report? No. Councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. Can I get a show of hands? All those in favour, please. And against, and declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, we will now move on to notices of motions. I will, just to foreshadow that I will like to speak on this motion, but I will do so after the discussion and debate has concluded amongst councillors at the end of that section. CEO Salomon, can you please outline the notice of motion received by you?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. We have a notice of motion this evening submitted by Mayor Binks and Councillor Andrews in relation to seeking opportunities for deputations to ministers and support from federal members of Parliament in relation to Council's proposal to host, to be a host for the rowing event during the 2026 Commonwealth Games, should that be determined to be a sport. The notice of motion is set out on page 230 of the agenda and is in 5 parts. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Solomon. Councillors, do we have a mover for this notice of motion? Councillor Andrews. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hourigan. Thank you, Councillor Hourigan. Is there any opposition to this notice of motion? No. Councillor Andrews, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. With the 4 regional locations that were read out the last week or so, it appeared that we didn't feature in those. So no to our grace, but it's important that we the door was left open regarding other opportunities for regional Victoria to put in for events if they were to come about. And in part of the Shire here, we have the Nagambie Rowing Centre. So that would, and as we saw with the Australian Nationals Championships a couple of weeks ago, it brought a lot of business and a lot of people, a lot of recognition to our Shire. So I think riding on those coattails, if you like, I think it wouldn't be inappropriate if we were to put this notice of motion in to have the council go through with what we've laid out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Hourigan, would you like to speak to the motion? No. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. Okay, I would just like to add that a key role of council is to advocate for our community, and this is a really great opportunity for council to advocate on the behalf of the community to be able to be a host for rowing, to both push for rowing to be one of the additional sports selected for the 2026 Commonwealth Games, and for that to be hosted at the Lake Ngambie Regatta Centre. As Councillor Andrews mentioned, we have exhibited our abilities to be able to host large rowing regattas in this at this site in our Shire, and there is some great opportunities to bring these games to this region of Victoria, which has kind of missed out in this announcement that's come about with the 4 regional cities not falling into the northeast region. So not only would we be advocating on behalf of Strathbogie Shire and particularly the Ngambie Lakes Regatta Centre, but also working in partnership with our neighbouring Shire in Shepparton, who were really great in supporting us in the nationals and getting those to our Shire. So it's a really great example of how council can work to advocate to our state and federal government partners, but also to work across councils with our neighbouring shires and show that support for the broader region to bring events like this, which will have clear economic, social and ongoing benefit to the region. So I commend the motion to my fellow councillors. Councillors, I will put the motion to the vote. Can I get a show of hands for all those in favour, please? And against, and declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. CEO Salomon, are there any notices of rescission for this meeting?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, there are no notices of rescission.
Thank you. Is there any urgent business this evening, CEO Salomon?
Again, through you, Mayor, there is no urgent business for this evening.
And is there any confidential business this evening?
Once again, through you, Mayor, and likewise, there is no confidential business to consider.
Okay, thank you, CEO Salomon. Councillors, the next meeting of council is scheduled to be held on Tuesday, the 17th of May 2022, commencing at 6 p.m. It is intended that this meeting will be held in the Euroa Community Conference Centre. However, this will be dependent on any COVID-19 restrictions which may be in place. There being no further business, I declare that the meeting closed at 7:32 p.m. and thank you for your attendance and everyone tuning in, and have a great Anzac Day on Monday. Thanks, everyone.